Well, thank you, Bruce, for that introduction, and thanks for inviting me here back again after last year. Clearly, Bruce doesn't learn, but I shot Bruce a late night email last night and said, "Do you mind if I throw a few political elbows tomorrow?" He said, "Oh, that's fine." So, in the spirit of bipartisanship, I'm going to do it not quite in the way that we're used to hearing it so much these days. I'm going to throw some elbows both ways, and I hope you. Well, I hope you're not too offended, but if you are, then you're probably part of the problem and not the solution. So, with that introduction, and now I'll see if this works. Which way do I aim it?
Let's see. There you go.
Where is the?
It's back there.
Back that way. Okay, great. So I'm going to begin with the story that we thought we would hear in the inaugural address in January of 2009. I'm doing this because this is what I'm going to be talking about is how to talk about kids. But I'm going to use this as an example of storytelling, which is a crucial piece of how you talk about kids. The general story of what's happening to them in America, as well as their specific life stories and how that can move people. But I'm going to start with a case of what could have been in terms of a story. So here is what that story might have sounded like. I know you're scared and angry. You've seen the money that you put away for your retirement, for your kids' college disappear. Your homes drop in value, and many of you have lost your jobs or are afraid that you will. This was not an accident. This was not an act of God. This was not a natural disaster. This was a disaster made by men, greedy men, Wall Street gamblers who speculated with our lives and our futures. This was the natural outcome of what we were told would make us prosperous. Just eliminate the regulations, let the rich get richer, and it will all work out. We'll never again fall for that story. Our grandfathers did. They went through this 80 years ago, but we learned something from them then about how to fix it. It won't be easy, it won't be quick, but we will do everything we can to make you safe again, and we will restore the American dream. See, Ronald Reagan was wrong. Government isn't the problem. Government isn't the solution. Government is us, working together to solve our shared problems, and we will never again let it get hijacked by big corporations and Wall Street gamblers with their own interests rather than ours at heart. Right now, the private sector has its hands tied because no one has the money to spend or invest. Only us, we the people, through strong leadership and the power of government, can spend enough to put Americans back to work. And we will take this opportunity to rebuild America, to rebuild our crumbling bridges, our roads, our schools, and our hope. The heart of the economy has stopped pumping, but we're going to get out the paddles. We may have to use them several times, but we'll do it until the blood is pumping again in our economy. We'll bring to justice the parasites who did this to us, and we'll tie the hands of greed and recklessness so they can never do this again. We can't promise that we won't make mistakes along the way, but we can promise you that they will be honest mistakes and that your government has your back again. America, the America you once knew, is back. That's what I expected to hear in January of 2009. And that message would have inoculated against everything that has happened in the last 2.5 years, where we now have our hands tied with the chattering class chattering about how we're going to balance the budget on the backs of everyone who is vulnerable, children, people who are vulnerable by virtue of being poor, seniors, working families, after passing $120 billion tax cut to the rich, to millionaires and billionaires. That's where we are now, and it would be very difficult for that to have happened if this had been the story we had been told. How, in fact, did we end up where we are now? Let me know if I can't tell, because I don't have, unfortunately, my eyes. I disconnected the eyes from the back of my head, so I can't tell if these are moving as what I'm glancing at here with my aging eyes is moving as well. So let me know if it doesn't move. Maybe Bruce, you can go like this, and I'll know, or some appropriate hand signal, maybe. If my elbows get sharper and sharper, it may be slightly different hand signal than that, but. So how did we get where we got? Well, instead of indicting the people whose recklessness crashed the economy and their enablers in government, we put them in charge of it. That's not what most of us expected when we heard change we can believe in. Instead of offering a narrative about what happened, the administration urged us to look forward, not backward, even as its opponents became bolder in their attacks. You know, FDR never made that mistake. FDR ran against Herbert Hoover 4 times, and as I recall, he won all 4 times. And the way he ran against Herbert Hoover was that he never failed to say, this was the Hoover Depression. This was the Republican Depression. This was the natural outgrowth of conservative economic policies. He said those things over and over and over again. And he was famously known for saying in his 1936 convention address, at no time in our history have more powerful men focused their hatred on one man than at this point in our history. And I welcome their hatred. Can you imagine any of our political leaders saying that today? There's certainly a lot of hatred, but it isn't being welcomed. Instead of listening to Nobel Prize-winning economists, maybe reading a history of the New Deal, that would have been useful, or looking to their values, that might have been most useful, Democrats produced a half stimulus that produced half results, which was predictable. I mean, Paul Krugman told us about it, Stiglitz told us about it, a number of economists warned us about it in advance. They said, well, if you cut that from $1.2 trillion to 6 or 700 billion, and you lard it up with tax cuts that we already know from the last 8 years don't work, you're not going to have that big an effect. You might avert a Great Depression, but you'll end up with an economy that's still in tatters. To the average American, they proved that Ronald Reagan was right, that government can't do anything, and that if it can, it certainly can't do anything right. The average American, in fact, had no idea what Democrats were trying to accomplish by spending. The only thing that they were aware of, and that they to this day are aware of, is that the Democrats just spent a bunch, and that's where we are now. And all they do know is that they're still unemployed, they're still worried about taking care of their families, and they're still worried about their kids who are now, for the 4th year, graduating without a job, whether it's from high school or whether it's from college. And Republicans have once again offered a compelling story. Our misery is the natural outcome of tax and spend liberalism. So, where are we now? We have our politicians from both sides of the aisle fighting over who can do a better job of promoting Hoover's agenda. You know, in some ways, this is what Jamal was just describing, is that we have an American electorate that is scared and angry and worried about what's happening to them and their families and their kids, and we have the chattering class and the corporate class and the politicians who well, I'll be charitable, not say that next sentence. We have the politicians who are all focusing on something entirely different than the American people are focused on. So after cutting the taxes of millionaires 6 months ago, the two parties are now competing over who can cut bigger holes in the social safety net for American families in the name of fiscal responsibility. I don't know about you, but for those of you who have ever seen the movie Casablanca, I see a lot of young faces who probably haven't. Go out and rent it tonight. It's a great movie. But it reminds me of the line from that movie. You know, you cut taxes by $120 billion, and then you go, oh my God, there's a fiscal crisis. It's like that line from the movie, there's gambling in this establishment. You know, of course you have a big deficit if you do things like that.